Hey guys, and welcome back to another digital painting tutorial where I will teach you how to make this little winter haven painting, which I named Snowlit Haven. Welcome to my channel, Creatively Me with Bree, and yes, you guessed it, I am Bree. And hopefully by the end of this tutorial, you'll have something that looks a little bit like this. Alright, first let's get into the dimensions that we'll be working in today. Under your Actions button, go to Canvas, Canvas Information down at the bottom there. And here's where you can title your work and sign your name if you would like. The dimensions that we'll be working in, 2160 pixels by 3840 pixels at 300 dpi. And the color profile of which we're using is the default, which is the second option from the top of the available color profiles. Before we jump into the actual painting process, don't forget to subscribe and be sure to click the link down below for Patreon where you can get a copy of this sketch as well as the color palette for free. Heading into our colors options, I'm going to the third line of the color palette and selecting the second beige color. Next, I'm going to go into layers and select the plus sign to add a new blank layer, put it underneath the sketch, and I'm going to drag and drop the color onto the canvas. Two main brushes that we'll be using from the brush library are under painting, which will be the oil brush as well as the turpentine brush. Selecting the fourth color of the third line of the color palette, I will be introducing some more variations of the beige colors. And I'm using that darker beige around the corners, trying to create sort of a vignette. I believe that's how it's pronounced. In my head, it's always vinaigrette, which is, wrong, but I am human. And then next I'll be selecting this rather cool color blue, and I'll be introducing it into the center parts of the painting. And I'm keeping all of this on one layer. I'm going to my smudge tool. I do end up using turpentine. I know I select the oil paint, but I do go back. This is what the oil paint looks like. It's fine, but I like the texture that I get out of the turpentine. And so you can see how much more texture there is. So I do keep the turpentine as my blending for the background. And there is no rhyme or reason to my brush strokes other than I'm just trying to preserve the color while also blending it. I know that's rather contradictory. And I also have more contradiction for you here. I am not only trying to smudge and soften it up, but I'm also trying to keep some texture at the same time. Hopefully that makes some semblance of sense to you. So here I wanted to demonstrate why we need to keep things on the same layer and not separate. So here is me on its own layer right there. It's separate from the main layer that we've been painting on. And so you can see there it's kind of transparent and obviously doesn't pick up the colors that we've been working in on that one layer. So I combine them, and now here you can see that that lighter blue, that cool blue, is mixing with that dark brown, and the beige is mixing with the surrounding colors as well. So now that I've done that demonstration, I am going to start fresh so you can see what I would choose to do here. I'm going to choose a blue that's on the second layer. It's the first blue of that layer. And this will sort of act as a guide for some of the shadows, but also just some of the texture on the tree. I'm currently using the oil brush, but I do switch back and forth to turpentine as well. I personally enjoy both of them. They just have slightly different responses on the canvas. So it's what sort of speaks to you and works best for the piece that you're working on. I also encourage you to put the sketch on, take it off, so you can see how the readability of the paint is going. And this helps me know if, without the use or the help or aid of the lines, whether or not the paint is starting to make sense to the eye, and if it's conveying the shapes and the shadows the way that I need them to. I know it's a little quiet. A lot of this piece is me just sort of doing repetitive motions and just testing out colors and testing out the different brushes and just trying to get it to come together. There is literally no way that any of our pieces could possibly be identical. They can be similar, but they will not be identical. Take this time as an opportunity to get familiar with these brushes if you've not used them before. There really is no right or wrong way. And also, it's okay to have different styles from one another. I feel like the readability is getting better. So I'm just going to continue to build up my colors. And you'll notice I have not started blending or smudging any of the colors yet. I'm just laying down my colors where I want them so that I start to get an idea of how my background trees are coming together. I'm going back into layers, taking off my sketch so I can see how it's coming along. I'm going to use the smudge tool now, and I'm using the turpentine. And now I'm going to start blending these colors out and about. And I love how much these brushes really move and get the colors interacting really nicely the way that you would see with actual paint. I'm trying to be mindful of as I am smudging or blending these colors, the direction of my brush strokes, because I do want the trees to make sense. So keeping the brush strokes consistent with the flow of the tree branches will be helpful in making these read best and also be able to differentiate from one tree to the next. Here I am continuing to work up the shape, finding spots where there might need more shadow or definition. I'm trying to stick to some of these blue tones to try and create shadows. I really tried to stay away from using like black or even gray as much as I could for shadow in this. I really wanted it to be as light and airy as possible. So blue, especially the navy blue, really acts mostly as my shadow. And then I use a variety of blues and beiges to help create the, midtones of the piece. All right, there might be less and less talking as the piece goes on. I'm just going to be selecting colors and building up like I did with the previous trees. I'll comment when I feel like there's something new to talk about. In the meantime, happy painting. really try not to be afraid of making mistakes. I know it can be really daunting to paint on a single layer and worry, what if I mess up? But I do think that this is a really good way for us perfectionists to work on sort of letting that part go, trusting the process. I've noticed that while I work in this particular style with these types of brushes, that it's also really pushed me to say it's okay if I mess up because I can just paint on top of it, the same sort of attitude I would have had when I was painting with my traditional mediums. And so it's been really helpful. I hope that you find it as helpful as I do because this has been fun and challenging in equal measures, that's for sure. The smart way, the easiest way to paint the trees is to start from the back and work your way forward. On the left side of the canvas, I worked from the front tree to the back tree. It was fine, it's definitely possible. But since I had three trees and they were slightly staggered, I decided on the right side to start with the one at the back, then the second one, and now I'm working on the front one. So the first tree. And again, I trust myself now to be able to, repaint it if absolutely necessary. But if you're looking for less work, definitely try to work from the back of the canvas towards the front in terms of the items or the objects rather that you're painting. So just keep that in mind. It's at this point I realize I need a little bit more shadow and color variation for some of the trees up here. So I do add a bit more shadow. Um, Here where I know there's going to be some harsher, maybe not harsh, but harsher light in this area because there will be like a overhead light as well as string lights. So I want to make sure that I'm, getting some darker colors in there for the shadowed areas because the light will illuminate the tops of the trees more so than the bottom. Honestly, I was just in love with the use of blue in this piece. I had so much fun using it as sort of the mid-tones and some of the shadows, but also the suggestion of snow. And I had so much fun with that. Similar to the other side, I realize I need more shadow here at the front of this tree. So front to us, back to the tree, I guess. But yeah, so I add in some darker colors so that the tree can start to stand out just a bit more, mostly towards the bottom where the shadows would be the deepest. I mean, seriously, look at this tree lot coming along. You could put some silhouettes of more trees in the background, but I chose to stick with these. I'm going to add a new separate layer on purpose. I'll show you why. I'm going to use the navy blue here. I'm going to select turpentine, and I'm going to create the string of lights here up at the top. Eventually, I will combine it with the background, but um, for this part, I knew that there would be some things that I would need to figure out before I combine it with the background. So I get my lines down first. There they are, a little hard to see. So I do end up, increasing some of the darkness on parts of it. So it stands out just a teeny tiny bit more. Then I'm going to my layers. I'm going to add a layer. I'm going to the blending modes and selecting add. Now under colors, I'm going to select the lightest beige color we have. And this is what I'm going to use to make the lights. Under brush, I am going to inking and the Inca so I can have a textured but also slightly more defined brush to help create these smaller details. Once I'm done, I'm going to duplicate that layer, going to the layer at the bottom, the one that was duplicated. I'm going to use the smudge tool, turpentine, and I'm going to use that to smudge the lights so it kind of looks like they have an outer glow happening, which will be more obvious in a moment. Okay, and now going back to that layer, I am adjusting the opacity. Adjust the opacity to your liking. Mine's around, I think, halfway point. And now I'm going to combine those. And now I'm going to combine all of those layers together so that it's all on one layer like we've been working in. Look at that. We already have a tree lot. Now we're going to work on some of the shrubbery, bushes, plants down at the bottom. I select the third blue from the top. There we go. I think. Yes. Sorry. I'm going to go back into my painting brushes and I'm going to select oil paint and I'm going to just start getting down some of that color and shape of the foreground. Once I have my foreground sort of established, I'm going back into my layers. I'm going to the very dark blue, the darkest blue, the navy blue that we have, and I'm going to put that at the very corners to suggest that that is the darkest part. Then I'm going to use the fourth blue from the top of that color palette and use that along the edges of this bush to sort of indicate snow, light, and then I'm going to use the turpentine smudge or blending tool, whatever way you would like to call it, and start to hopefully make it look like some sort of greenery is happening here, even though it's bluery because it's blue. But I think you get what I mean. Adding a new layer, I'm going to the light blue again, and I am selecting the turpentine, and I'm just going to add in just a little bit more focused detail than I did before. Similar to what I've done with the trees for the tree lot portion. Do use the smudge tool and soften up some of the colors, blend some of it better together, really get some of that texture out of the turpentine brush. Next, I'm going to use the second lightest color. I'm going to turn my canvas so that I can have just a steadier, brush stroke and just get that down on the ground. It might be a little hard to read here in the video, but it is there. I use this light blue as well, just to get some of the, contrast of warm and cool colors. Now we're going to work on the deer. I'm going to select a separate layer for now. I'm going to add the plus sign, and I'm going to use the second brown in the middle of the color palette. When I go into my brush library, under inking, there's a brush called Inka. We've used it for the lights up above. I'm going to use it to get down the shape of the deer. Once I have the deer down, I will combine it with the background layer so that we can color it the way that we did before. But I just wanted to take a moment and just, make sure that I don't accidentally mess up anything that I feel really good about right now, which is the background. Since I am going to smudge and combine the deer with the background, I'm not going to get too worried about overlap of the opacity and how the deer is not a consistent color, because it really doesn't matter. So try not to get too stressed out if your coloring is not perfect like mine. It's going to be okay. We'll work through it. All right, so now let's take a look and see what it looks like without that sketch. And now we have our deer silhouette. Now we have our smudge tool, and I'm just going to blend or smudge the colors that are a little bit darker where the paint overlapped with itself. Just soften up some of the harsh edges. We'll be doing this for a while, so don't worry. We'll also be doing this, periodically throughout the piece. So if you don't get everything right now, don't stress. We'll have time. And I don't show it for some reason. I'm not sure where I accidentally edited this part out, but I do combine the deer to the background. So now it's all one piece, okay? And if you've been working on it as a separate piece, don't worry. Combine now. No problems. We got this. Selecting the second darkest blue, I go back to my turpentine, and on a separate layer from the main layer, I am creating the shadow for underneath the deer so that the deer, sits a little bit better inside the painting. And I didn't want it to disrupt what I already had there, so I'm just making sure I like it. Just making sure it goes well. I'm not yet ready to combine that layer with the main layer, so go back to my main layer and I resume moving around the oil paint on our digital canvas and trying to get the shape of the deer to look a little bit more natural and have the continuity of the colors as well as the style come together. I think one of the biggest things that helped make it look so like the deer was not painted on a separate layer to begin with was softening up the edges and combining the colors together. Best example is here, grabbing the light color from the background and working it in, and then working the dark color out. And this is how it helps sort of bridge the difference between the harsh edge that we painted with a different brush and the oil painting turpentine style that we've been using. So it does require a little bit of repainting, but I really wanted to make sure I had the shape of the deer just right. And so once I had it down, I felt more confident that I could do this portion. As I suggest in almost all of my digital tutorials, zoom in, zoom out, get a good look at what your piece looks like from a distance and up close. Both are valid, both are meaningful and helpful, but make sure all of the details are reading properly, that the colors are flowing, that the highlights and shadows are making sense. And as I've demonstrated a couple times throughout this tutorial, take off the sketch and see how is the paint holding up without the guided lines of the sketch. So now we're going to introduce some of the warmer beige tones that I selected for this, and I'm not going to overdo it, just add a suggestion of warmth to the fur. And now I'm going to select the darkest beige, or now it's brown, and create shadows where they're necessary. These shadows will lighten up as we blend or smudge the colors together, but at first it's going to be a little bit on the darker side. Taking away the sketch, you can see just how dark it is, but then you'll see it starts to lighten up pretty quick. I used a couple different references in order to get the coloring as well as the style of this reindeer down. So, don't be afraid to look up reference if you don't know what the coloring should look like, or, how you want to potentially stylize or design the deer. I went for something that was in between realistic as well as a slight illustration. I think you'll notice the most illustration portion when I do the face on the reindeer or the deer, whatever you'd like to call it. Really wanted to exaggerate the eyes a little bit here while still having it be, um, like I've said, more realistic. If I wanted to go a little bit more illustration, perhaps a bit more whimsical, I could have made the eyes a bit bigger. But I already felt like these eyes were very doe eye looking, and I felt like that was enough of a suggestion of um, illustration meets realism. All right, we're getting really close to the end here. I want to show you the finishing touches. So first we're going to add a blank layer. We're going to put the blending mode on add. We're going to make sure we are on the lightest beige color, which is more like a cream. We're going to use that with the turpentine brush to create a lot of really intense highlights, because I do plan on having a spotlight up above. And I really want the light intensity to come through, because I think this can look so whimsical by the end. Really trying to think about where would the harshest highlights be and come through, while also which ones would help really make the deer stand out against the background. Definitely highlighting the antlers on top. I do take a moment on that background layer to just add in a bit more color to the snow, so that there's just a bit more depth to the painting. I also add just a slightly lighter beigey color in the background. Um, and I just blend it in, careful not to overlap with the deer too much or take away too much detail from the trees. I add a new layer and I put it on blending mode add. Then I move layer 4 above layer 3, and I make sure that I am still on the light beige color. There we go. And then I select the brush oil paint. Here we go. Make sure it's rather large. And then I proceed with up and down motions to sort of create this very intense spotlight. And then I'm going to my smudge tool, making sure I have turpentine as my smudge option and that it's large. And I repeat the same sort of brush strokes back and forth, so that I'm getting rays of light, but not all at like the same intensity at the same opacity. I then go into my transform tool and use distort so that I can create more of a coned shape for the light, so that it really does focus on the deer. And then I go to my airbrush eraser, medium blend, get it at the right size, and I erase wherever I don't need the spotlight on. I also make sure I erase it where the deer is as well, just to make sure it's not taken away too much from the deer's detail. I add a new layer and then I put that as well, also on the add blending mode, and head on down to the elements brush, which is snow driven, and I add some snow to the piece. And I think this detail makes it just look so whimsical. For final detail, I'm going to layer 3, which is the bottom of the add layers, and I make sure I have my very light beige. I go into my paintbrushes, select oil paint, and I add just a little bit of that oil down at the bottom, really creating a nice highlight so that the snow stands out just a touch more in certain spots where the light might hit it more than others. Now I can combine all 3 of those add blended modes. So there we go, with light without the special lighting effect. I'm going to do one more. That's layer 4, put it on add, go to turpentine with that cream color, the lightest of those yellows that we have, and I'm going to add in just a little bit of highlight along the trees so they stand out a bit more from the background. And then I go in and soften them up with the blending tool or the smudge tool. And then I also make sure I add just a tiny bit along the tops of these bushes, the shrubs in the foreground. I smudge and soften those lines. And now we are all finished. So here's the final product. I hope that you have something that resembles this or something that you're really proud of. If you do decide to post to social media your finished piece, please make sure to tag me. I'd love to see your final products. And thank you as always for subscribing, watching, liking, commenting, and supporting my channel. And I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial. Okay, bye.